that. Dude, my fingers. All right, everybody. Here we go. We have got our fourth and final portion of this conversation for this particular weekend. Gold stars all around. You guys are crushing it. If you have questions, you will need to just raise your hand now because Aaron already took the box. If you're online, I don't think we have they can't message in or something, can they? They could in theory? No. All right. Send a carrier pigeon. This conversation is on building tech trust. Oh, Aaron, we need the handout. There is a handout for this. Sorry, I was just noticing Owen on a chair. It's exactly what my Owen would do. We've got a conversation that is reviewing what we talked about yesterday. So you'll notice on this handout that you will receive here in a moment. The conversation yesterday started with what are the two types of tech, and we've got that. Maybe. Give me a moment. I'm waiting. It's thinking. Radio waves are traveling. There we are. All right. You've already met my family. We'll skip them. Although they are lovely. I mean, look at those little humans. It's a good thing they look like their mom. Two types of tech, which are tool and drool. Then we talked about how to assess our tech health with a reset. We got those 5 areas. We know that that is a conversational tool, not a victory tool. That's beautiful. You'll see those on this handout because there generally is another part, but because you've all been here before, I don't have to run through it right now. Then we talk about building a hedge. We've talked about this once, and I just wanted to touch on it, and that's the launch point for our conversation about how do we build tech trust. So we're going to review the hedge, talk about using the right tech and at the right time. At the end of this time is when we'll have the Q&A. We'll work on some clarification pieces, and then we will walk back out into the real world and work on stretching that rubber band of our brains and seeing if we can get it to stay in a shape that includes healthful tech. Aaron is bringing out these handouts right now for you. So to review our conversation, building a hedge involves our network, our devices, and our family framework, which you have in front of you, and that's amazing to be able to do this. The Griffin router and the Bark Home. This was asked, so I just want to clarify. The Bark Home is a separate device. You don't need them both. The Bark Home, I believe, is like $80. The Griffin router is $280 for the new one, $180 for the older one. It's the thing that provides your internet. The Bark Home is just the thing that attaches to your existing router. Again, we're providing a hedge around our home network. So smartphones that don't have cell service will use this. Smart TVs, gaming devices, this is your first layer of defense. Then you go to your devices and use something like Bark. Someone asked me, but what about the Bark phone? Thank you. The Bark phone is separate from the software. It just came out in January, and I am trying to work on the nuance because they just call it the Bark phone. So, Bark is two things. It's a piece of software you can install on any phone. That device leaves your home, and it is still going to be accountable to your family expectations. You're not doing this because you don't trust your child. You're giving them this because you do. If you did not trust your child, they would not have a smartphone. So you trust them enough to go out in the world, and you're verifying that they're going to stay safe. It's very hard to self-report. I promise as a young person, when something goes wrong, they don't want to have to ask for help. They want someone to know they need help. This is a wonderful way to do it. The smartphone side of Bark is the Bark phone. It comes with a default towards safety, whereas an Apple iPhone defaults towards privacy. The Bark phone runs on its own plan. It's a Verizon plan. You'll get a separate bill from Bark. It's $50 a month, which includes the cost of the phone and the self-service. It comes with Bark installed, and it's hardwired into the device, which means you can't circumnavigate it using that device. I do like that. You can't start it in safe mode and get into different things through back doors on the programming side. It also defaults to safety, meaning you don't have to set up family sharing. You don't have to set up family protection pieces on that or screen time on that device because it comes already defaulted. that allows you to open the App Store only in the amount you want. And it also allows you to monitor conversations without invading privacy, so you're not getting dictation of every text they've sent for the day. If you feel you need that, your child probably isn't ready to have a smartphone. You're allowing your child to go into those spaces, have those conversations, and Bark is the thing that notifies you when it goes sideways. Covenant Eyes is that, but only for pornography. So Bark, the reason I encourage that for young people, it looks for conversations, it looks for searches, it will pick up conversations and texts on things like depression and self-harm and eating disorders, and conversations that are sexual in nature. Whereas Covenant Eyes is only looking for pornographic content. That is important, but it's about a third of what your kid is going to run into while they're on the internet. So Bark, I believe, is a good first part. If you want to use them both, you absolutely can. It's $15 a month for Bark if you're using it as an add-on, $50 a month if you're using their phone, and that's your phone service and your Bark subscription. And then Covenant Eyes is about, I think it's up to $20. I'm grandfathered in, so I have weird old pricing. I think it's about $20 a month. And again, it's the real-time scanning, so I do appreciate that. You've made a family tech framework. Gold star. If you need any more on that, it's gospeltechworkshop.com. Berean is your code at the bottom, and that will allow you a free license to review any of those. They're 5 to 8 minute videos. It's me in front of a camera being as slow tech and low tech as I can. In those videos, I literally write on a whiteboard. So it's just all there. There's no slides where you remember, like, what was just happening? It's all there on a giant whiteboard in a warehouse. It's amazing. So you can check that out. So the idea behind the hedge is to make good decisions easier. That's our premise. It's not to make our kids safe. It's not to stop them from ever engaging in anything bad. It's to make bad decisions hard to make and good decisions easy to make. We've already reflected, so we're not going to run through that, but there is time to reflect on why a hedge, what are we going to build it around, how does it keep us hope and not fear? And again, 155 to 158 on the Gospel Tech podcast. So then our question is, all right, how do we use the right tech? How do I know? My child has said, Mom or Dad, can I get a smartwatch? Can I get a smartphone? Can I play this game? Can I watch that show? Can I listen to this album? There's 3 questions we need to ask ourselves. The first question is it safe? Is this technology just safe on its face? Is it a good decision for anyone to use? What we're using as our biblical basis for this is Luke 11:11, when Jesus is talking about asking the Father for good things, and he says, hey, you are earthly parents, and when your kids ask you for something good, you want to give it to them. Think about this. Your kid asks you for something for Christmas, for their birthday, just for an odd Tuesday. You want to give it to them. I love giving my kids good gifts. We just need to make sure that thing's actually good. If they're asking you for something, and they go, Mom and Dad, can I have this egg? You just want to make sure it's not actually a scorpion. Sometimes technology is. So we go, all right, is it safe? The most safe, if you wanted a 4 out of 4, perfectly safe tech, it's going to be tool tech. It's not going to have a browser. It will not have free reign of the internet. There's not going to be any apps. There's no app store, because apps are notorious for having backdoors to the internet and having third-party content that can be rather tricky to monitor and keep safe at all times. And it's going to be able to be held accountable. So something like a smart TV, okay, well, on its face, it might be tool tech. A lot of smart TVs have app browsers. A lot of smart TVs have apps. A lot of smart TVs are very difficult to hold accountable if you don't have a hedge around your network. So you scored a 1 out of 4 on the safe tech side. On its face, a smart TV is not very safe. They're pretty difficult to keep accountable, and mistakes can be made. But they're not driven by algorithms. There's ways to keep them safe, and we can intentionally deal with that. Your child wants a smart TV, you can talk about it. Just make sure you know what you're dealing with. I'm not saying if it's not safe, you never deal with it. I make unsafe decisions all the time on purpose. In fact, one of my favorite sports is cycling. I love cycling on the road. Did you know that's insanely unsafe? I will shatter like a TIE fighter in any kind of an accident with the vehicle. I'll just be 1,000 little pieces. I do that intentionally, and I make choices to help it be safer. I have something called the Berean. It's incredible. It's made by Garmin. It's a tail light that can tell you when cars are coming. Comes to a head unit. It tells me not only how many cars there are, but how close they are to me. It physically shows me. I can see my speed. I can see my output. I can see how many cars are coming in what order. It's incredible. I make an intentional choice to do an unsafe thing in as safe a way as I can. I go at safe times of day. I don't bike at night. And I bike on roads that are relatively safe. Although in the Northwest, I have found the bigger the truck, the more mad they are that I'm on the road. I don't know why that happens, but if someone's going to throw something at me or curse or roll coal, why? Why roll coal? Do you know what that is, by the way? They get their diesel engines set so that when they accelerate, it just blasts smoke out. And since they're going 40 and I'm going 20, that smoke just rolls with me for the next mile. It sucks. It's really lame. But I be as safe as I can to avoid the areas where I know the biggest trucks are. Some of them, I think, are my brothers-in-law, just being mad that I'm out exercising. So we do this with safe tech. Is it safe? If it's not, it doesn't mean avoid it at all costs. It means know this thing is unsafe, and that may make it a poor choice for this child at this time, which is the next piece. When we talk about a perfect example of tool tech, no app, no browser, and accountable, something like a Gab phone. You're not going to be making unwanted mistakes. That is a wonderful example of safe tech. Gospel tech would be the code you can enter if you want to get a discount on that. The Bark phone. This is the phone specifically. I wanted to show you an example of it. When we use it, monitors text and apps, tracks location, block websites, approve app downloads. This would be an example of a modified safe tech. Yes, it has apps, but the back end of it is very controlled and helpful. It defaults to safety rather than to freedom. And when we're talking about extending our children into that digital cul-de-sac, I like defaulting to safety. The second question we ask, first we know if it's safe. We have 4 questions. Is it tool or drool tech? Does it have apps? Does it have a browser? Can it be held accountable? That'll tell us safe or not. Then we go, all right, does that meet family expectations? We've decided it's a good fit. It's safe enough. We can hedge it up and make it safe. But does it meet our family expectations? Again, returning to true, honorable, just, pure. Is it lovely, commendable, excellent, praiseworthy? If it meets our family expectations, then it's a good fit in this season. There are times where it's just not a good fit. This is a perfectly safe piece of technology, but it doesn't line up with what our family celebrates. That's important for us to know. We're not just, again, I said don't give your child a smartphone if they haven't asked. That would be an example, right? Family expectations, this thing might be safe enough, but does it fit with what we expect? And the last piece is, does it support my child's purpose? Your child has a purpose in Christ, and we want to make sure that this is extending that. We're returning again to Galatians. Now, yesterday I just referenced this, but I want to step on it. Galatians 5:22 talks about fruit of the Spirit, but did you know there's also a very clear example of fruit of the flesh? When we go and use our tech, does it bring out sensuality and idolatry, enmity, strife, jealousy, fits of anger, division, and envy? There are entire apps built around each of those. Entire apps meant just to stir up lust. Entire apps meant just to stir up envy. You go on and you do not celebrate God's goodness when you're done. You go, why, God, couldn't I have this person's life? Or abs, or spouse, or car, or work ethic, or whatever other thing. We are going to look at their life and say, God, I think you made a mistake. You gave that person the good stuff and I wanted it. When we engage in technology, does it produce fruit of the flesh? If it does, that's our conversation point. Again, maybe it means we need to remove it. Maybe it means we just need to use it differently, more intentionally, at a better time of day, only with people around us. I don't know. I'm going to ask you to pray into that and be faithful with what you found. But when we talk about, is this tech right for my family? My child asked for it. Should I give it to him? Is it safe? Does it fit family expectations? Does it produce good fruit in them? Because if you use tech, like we talked yesterday with the kids in the room, if there's tech that produces love and joy and peace and patience and kindness, we're going to want more of that tech. Right? We're going to want more of that engagement for our child because that's the kind of stuff we want to see produced in them. So ask yourself that question and then simply say, is it a good fit for us, for this child in this season? Maybe it's different for your 8-year-old than your 12-year-old, different from your 12-year-old than your 17-year-old. Remember that your house is the age of whatever your oldest child is. So my kids, 9, 7, and 4, my 4-year-old is being exposed to content that my 9-year-old was not exposed to at 4. She's watched all the Star Wars movies. we did not let Owen watch Star Wars at 4. Also, Owen would have wept at 4 if he had watched any of the Star Wars movies, right? Like, that would have been very traumatic for him. Hadley loves it. She's in. And then she also wants to watch Encanto on loop. So much princess in my life. It is crazy. So different. But we want to make sure the right tech is going to help our child reach their full potential. And that's the conversation we keep returning to. There are seasons, it shifts. Trust is being built up as it's used well. And when trust is lost, we move to a different season. Not because we're mad at our kid, not because we're trying to punish them into better behavior, but because we love them and we are simply adjusting accordingly to what love looks like and choosing the highest good for them in this season. So, when we talk about this conversation, the first piece of how do we make sure we're using the right tech, turn to your elbow partner, and there's 3 parts. First, how do we check if the tech is an egg or a scorpion? What's an example of a family expectation for tech? An example of tech supporting our child's purpose. Turn to your neighbor, 2 minutes, go. Yeah? All right. So, we've looked through how to know if our tech is safe. Were there any questions that came up from this? So, Then we're going to talk about, all right, how do we know if it's safe, if it's the right tech, and then how do we know it's the right time when we talk about building trust? The question coming is my child ready? Are they ready for the smartphone? Are they ready for this video game? Are they ready for this device or freedom or opportunity? And we talked about this again, but I want to drop this down. Are we being faithful in the little things? Luke 16:10 is our standard. If you're faithful in little, you'll be faithful with much. The example actually being spoken about is money. I still think it applies. How does your child spend their money? How do they earn their money? How do they save their money? It's going to show a lot about the heart posture and a lot of where they're pursuing satisfaction and enjoyment. When we look at little things, I don't need a 10 out of 10 on this. It's simply an example. 10 options. Pick 3. You're going to have these conversational points where your child will say, I think I'm ready for a smartphone. And you're like, that's interesting because you already can't go to bed on time. What is a smartphone going to do to your brain? That's super interesting because I already see you struggling in some relationships, and the internet only amplifies that. The number of relationships, the trickiness of those relationships, the strangers approaching in relationships. I want to know that you're going to be healthful and well. In a faith focus, your child may not trust and follow Jesus yet, but they need to be processing their faith. It's an important part of their personal development, wherever they're at in that question journey. If they're not taking it serious, you do not want to throw them on the internet. A third of the content on the internet is faith-related, including on apps like TikTok. There's a lot of people talking about God, for better or worse. There's a lot of talk about topics God thinks is important, like your identity and your purpose, your value and your worth, the choices you can make with your time. It's a prevalent conversation other than cat videos. You want to make sure your child is taking that serious before you throw them on the internet, which is basically theology 3.1. It's very advanced, high level. How do we know we exist? How do we know if we matter? How do I know that any of this is true? It's all on there. It's engaging in their video games. There's entire games premised around that. We want to make sure that we are helping them have the conversations, looking for faithfulness in those little things. So then how do we build that trust? Well, we practice it. So if your child isn't there yet, you're like, oh man, I looked at that and there's those 3 that I am concerned about before I allow you this level of independence, child of mine. I want to make sure we can do it. Let's practice it. So let's use smartphones as an example. Start with a public device. Child, you want a smartphone? That's awesome. Most of our kids mean they want to use a specific app. Usually that app is social media, but it might be a game or something else. So you're going to be allowed to do that from a public device in our home. An iPad that has accountability on it. A shared public computer in a hallway or a living room, not in the privacy of their own bedroom. It's going to be a public device, and they're going to show that they can manage their time well. They can be satisfied by going to that technology and using it for the agreed upon amount of time. If we're just using social media to connect with friends, you should be able to do that in under a half hour. If you need more than 30 minutes a day on social media for doing connected relationship activities, you're doing it wrong. There's something else happening that isn't relational intent. Doesn't make it bad, but it means it's a point for conversation, and public devices are going to allow us to establish that. Adults, this goes for us too. We should be able to set a time of day when we go to our tech. Andy Crouch wrote the book Tech-Wise Family. He also wrote the book The Life We're Looking For. He does an awesome job. If you want an encouraging book that discusses the culture around technology in the home, please read Andy Crouch's book. It's the reason we don't have a television in our home anymore. Because we went, wait a minute, yeah, why does all of our furniture point at this giant black box that we use for maybe an hour a day? Weird. Maybe we want to do, what else would our furniture point at, though? We had to ask that. We made a deal. My wife loves television. I generally loathe it because I was raised without it, and I was like, I don't remember why I need this thing. So we made a deal. I'd shiplap the living room if we got rid of the television. You can make a deal. That's fine. It looks lovely. All of our furniture points at other furniture. It's very unsettling for people. They walk in and they're like, oh no, where do I sit? I'm always looking at another person, right? What happens here? And it's super cool, and it's very calm. We didn't put any pictures on the shiplap. It's just calm white walls in a room with lovely space to sit and be. I would encourage you to do public devices and think through where is tech in our home and what does it say about our priorities? Does it line up with what we actually stand for? Then move them to a dumb phone. When we're talking smartphones, great. You can have this Gab phone. You can have this Bark phone. You're going to go show me you can handle this and be okay. Building the habits of using the tech for what it's there for. Mom or Dad, I need to be able to connect with you. Cool, this can do that. Mom or Dad, I need to be able to text my friends. Great, you can do that. Oh, none of them are on text, though. They're all on this app. Cool, public device will still allow you to do that. You can still message your friends from this device and stay connected and show up for that party or that sporting event or whatever the other thing is. You'll be there and you can see it from the outside on a public device. And then you can go to a shared device. This is where your parent allows you on their device on the app that has accountability on their phone. This is where you start to build. There are more features that come through on the app version of specifically social media. Guided access is something that allows you to make sure your child stays in the app that they're allowed to use, parents, on an iPhone specifically. This is one of the really cool features iPhones actually do have. You go under accessibility, scroll to the bottom, guided access, it locks you into the app. So my son uses Duolingo. He can't leave Duolingo when he's in that. He can't follow links on ads outside of the website. It just keeps him locked in for the amount of time he's allowed, and then it locks him off, and I can have my phone back and remove that feature. So, a great option for you on a shared device if your child is only using this one thing. If you're allowing them to use social media, absolutely, they can search anything they want on social media, but it keeps them on that app. It doesn't let them go to third-party sites or download anything additional that might get around parental controls. Finally, personal device. You've shown yourself trustworthy along this journey. Again, starting with the smartphone at 15 when your child's interested because we still want them to have a childhood. You could start a dumb phone before that. You could start a public device before that. They can engage in the space, but the net gain, just know, is often offset by net losses in a lot of the content they're going to experience in social media spaces. Those spaces are not intended for children. They're not built for children, and when they are built for children, they generally get creepy fast because it's not only children that show up. Roblox is currently experiencing that. Right? The difficulty of managing profit and user safety is a tricky combo, and companies are struggling with it right now. So, public device, then to a dumb device that's personal, then to a shared device that's a deeper dive but still has accountability, and then a personal device, extending your own independence but always going with the verification of a loving adult until the point they're an adult on their own. So the time is right when your child's faithful to little things, and how do we help them be faithful in the little things if they're not? We train it in little steps that prove faithfulness, starting with non-tech related faithfulness into little baby steps of tech, and that works with video games. Yeah, we're going to use a public device with video games. We're going to use old school video games, whatever we can find that's the least overstimulating for you, and the conversation is very similar in that space. What happens, though, if we were building tech trust and it was lost? They can't manage their time. They're being sneaky. They're starting to circumnavigate our family expectations. They're much smarter than you and I. If you're like, but how can I make sure they never do that? You can't. A child is very, very bright. Reddit and Quora are a thing. They will find people who are smarter than you and find ways to get around your safety net. If that's happening, that's when the tech comes away and go, great, well, I just can't provide you these resources that are going to allow you to harm yourself or others. So what do? We remove and replace. Again, coming back to if your right hand causes you to sin, if your right eye causes you to sin. This is not metaphorical at this point. This is giving up something that you like, that you want to provide, but it's no longer an egg. It's officially a scorpion. This is not a good gift. It doesn't bring out the fruit of the Spirit. One of the biblical mandates is children, obey your parents. It's one of the commandments that comes with a promise that life will be well for you. We want life to be well for our children, and we don't want to empower them to be actively disobedient. There's a season where that's our purview. There's a season where it's not. They'll be 18, they're an adult, it's between them and God. You don't have to allow mistakes to be easy, but the parenting, is different at that point. In this case, we're removing and we're replacing, not because we're mad at them, but because we're loving. And we're going to give them healthy options in the in-between time. There are families who say, well, I need my child to know how to handle this because when they turn 18, they're going to go to college. They're going to go to an apartment, and I want them to know how to handle this technology. Again, that is true if your child is asking for it. If they're saying, hey, mom or dad, can I have a smartphone? I really, really want one. I want to be a part of this world. I want to play these video games. I want to be on that social media app. I get it. That's the point where we train them. However, if your child isn't asking, I currently know of 0 cases of young people who don't want this technology, turning 18, leaving the home, finding a smartphone laying somewhere, and going on a month-long bender that destroys their life. We don't see it. What we see is young people going to college or going to their work life and going, you know what? I really wanted social media because I felt so left out. I wasn't part of the in crowd and I so wanted to belong, and now I don't care because those people aren't here and I'm pursuing the goals that I have for my life and I'm not beholden to what they think about me anymore. And I actually just realized this app doesn't care about my goals and it's just trying to distract me. And we see a lot of young people going to dumb phones on purpose, not as a punishment, and choosing apps and devices that support their goals and directives and dropping everything else. So your child, it's very possible, could make it to 18 or 20 without a smartphone and realize, I don't need this. Or when they get one for work, because they have to have it for their job for whatever reason, they only use it for work. And they connect over social media on their laptops, because all of them will have some form of computer. But we're realizing that young people aren't becoming adults and somehow getting eaten alive by technology that they don't know how to control. They're also not completely lost in the world because they can't figure out a smartphone. My 3-year-old figured out a smartphone pretty quick, right? She knew where the shows were. She knew how to find her princesses. She knows where to click. It's very scary. Your 18-year-old will be able to figure it out. They won't somehow miss out on a job because they didn't have a smartphone and they don't know what the internet is. If you want your child to be trained in specific tech, by the way, that would be a fine thing to do. Again, teach them Python, get them Scratch, buy them a 3D printer. There are ways to invest in their engineering and technological futures that will prepare them for work and won't distract them and damage their mind. So for this conversation then, how can we know if our child, is ready for tech? How can we build tech trust, and what do we do when trust is broken? 2 minutes. So when we wrap up this conversation on building tech trust, we're going to build that hedge because we're setting ourselves up for success. We're lovingly putting distance between us and things that might be harmful. We're making sure we're giving our children eggs by making sure it's a safe piece of tech that fits our family expectations and supports our child's purpose. And then we're going to do those little things that build to bigger things, non-tech things that then develop into tech things. And when it goes sideways, we don't just punish our kid or say we're embarrassed in them or try to shame them into being right. We're going to lovingly remove stuff that's damaging and replace it with things that are helpful. That doesn't always mean it's easy. Our child will not always be happy with that decision. They might have wanted to make the mistake. It doesn't mean you just empower the mistake. It means that you do step in as a loving parent, unilaterally sometimes making good choices, because your kid doesn't always want to make good choices. That's the parenting spot we're in, and support those opportunities. We're not just removing it forever. I already looked ahead at one of the questions, and we kind of addressed that idea of, well, if I remove it, won't it just make my child want it more? We'll get to that. But the idea is removing it is still the loving thing. It's still the biblical thing to do. It's not behavior modification, because it's happening in response to a trust issue, and that's getting at a heart issue, and we're pruning the tree is what we're doing at this point. Most of our drool tech is behavior modification, behavioral psychology, operant conditioning chambers. So by removing that, we're allowing our child to form new habits, develop new brain pathways that will help them be healthier and more whole in all areas of life, and specifically in technology. So that is our conversation about tech trust. You did it. I have 4 questions written down on a card. Is that all right if I jump straight into them? Is that okay? All right, as we go through, if you have any questions, you are welcome to ask me. We have until noon, I believe. You are welcome to get up at any point in that, grab your refreshments, go to your car, take a nap, do whatever you need. But what we have just done, to review, is we have talked about young people, how do we use tech on purpose, not for purpose. We've talked, parents, about the big 3, smartphones, video games, pornography. We dove into building a family framework. We did the hedge piece, and then we just talked about how do we build tech trust. What we have now is the foundation to begin these conversations with our kids of like, all right, so what does that look like with our TV time? What does that look like with our smartphone time? What does that look like with our friends and their tech? When you go somewhere else, you have all of the talking points for that. When family members at Christmas come over and have different tech standards, you now have the platform to begin a conversation, not in judgment, but saying, hey, our family understands there's 2 kinds of tech. Hey, our family understands that we struggle with this part of a reset. It clicks really quick. You don't need 4 hours of conversation. You need 3 minutes. It will make sense to people who've never heard it before. It's why some of that information was repeated, because I don't need a lot of different things to say. I just need the same thing said a lot and a lot of different ways. It's what the podcast is. You're not going to hear brand new information that isn't anywhere else in gospel tech. You listen to podcasts, like, wait, I've heard him say that before, right? And I've been saying it for 3 straight years, 170 podcast episodes at 30 minutes apiece. That's days of Nathan talking straight. But it's roughly the same information, just looped, applied to new scenarios, unpackaged with new Bible verses. So just know that when I answer these, they might sound very similar too, and that's the idea of giving these 4 all at once, is you now have these practical pieces, and I see you kind of like as little tech sparks. You're going to go out in the world and start your own little fires. You're going to go out and bring some light into some other dark places that I would never be able to reach, because I'm one man with 3 kids who lives on the West Coast. So that's my hope and expectation in doing this, and my prayer that God will use this as we move forward. So some questions, sharing the gospel without being irritating. Can we use a blog, something else, social media? This is a question I ask every single day of myself. What is it appropriate to share the gospel with on the interwebs? I could expend every waking moment shouting Bible verses at people on the internet. I don't think that's the biblical model. What I would say is start by praying. Ask God to give you the humility to understand your need for Him and the conviction to understand what it looks like to serve people in light of the gospel. I will share wherever you share the gospel, in relationship, over the interwebs, in daily life, it's going to be done in humility and it's going to be done personally. You're going to be meeting a need. I don't see a biblical model for just being right. Jesus had lots of opportunities where He chose to not be right. Look at the woman at the well. He had lots of true things He could have said about her and her choices. Instead, He called out her sin. He called her to truth in light of who he was and invited her into a relationship. The outcome was she went and told the whole city, and they're like, whoa, if God can change this lady, we want to see it. And as they came out of the city, Jesus says, look, the harvest is plentiful and the workers are few. That's what we need to recognize. It is not your job to save the world. Jesus already did that. It's not your job to fix the world. It's the reason we have the Holy Spirit. It's your job to be faithful in wherever God's put you. Some of us are in just seasons of work right now. It's not going to be glamorous. There's not going to be anyone who knows about the work you do, and that might be on purpose. There might be areas where you feel convicted to share the gospel and to step out in faith, and you don't want to because it's not fun or it's not pretty or you don't know how you're going to make a living doing it. If it's coming from the Holy Spirit, it's going to line up with the Bible. You're not doing anything unbiblical. It's going to line up with the attitude and stature that Jesus taught us as being followers of him. You're not going to snuff out the smoldering wick. The people who are hungry for hope are going to be drawn to you. And the people who are like, yeah, but I'm doing this right, you need to get off my back, Pharisees, who do church well, they're going to get mad about it more often than not because they think it's an either or. You can either follow the law well or love Jesus, and they think they've got the law down. Look at who you're irritating with your words. You shouldn't be snapping the people who need the most hope. That's not what Jesus did. He died for them and for you and me. So I'd say wherever you share the gospel, make sure you're sharing intentionally. And I would share this in addition. Some of the most biblical, loving, gospel-focused people I've ever met, you will never meet. My Papa Pete lived till he was 98, loved Jesus, Norwegian to the max. I once told Papa I loved him on a phone call. Love you, Papa. Okay. Hung up. I got a phone call 5 minutes later. Hello? Nathan, this is Papa Pete. Just wanted to say I love you too. Right? Papa was not a great communicator. But he loved Jesus, and he's an example. He was married to my grandma for 60 years. Was not a perfect human being, but looked more like Jesus at the end of his life than he did at the beginning. Fought in World War II, flew a blimp in the lighter-than-air program. Right? Lived a lot of life, made a lot of mistakes. You will never meet Papa Pete. He would never stand up here. He would die 1,000 deaths having to do this. And yet he's a major part of when I live my life and I pray and I think through what does it look like to apply the gospel. Papa Pete is a living example of what finishing your race well looks like. You might be that person for someone else. When we talk about what does it look like to share the gospel in a digital age, maybe it means getting online. Maybe it means being offline so you can be present enough to be a Papa Pete to someone in your life. So I hope that makes sense. I'm just going to say I don't think we all have to jump on the internet because those people aren't going to get saved if we're not there. I think the Lord's equipped some people, and I'm trusting that those people are being empowered by the Holy Spirit and not doing it selfishly. And I hope the Lord uses their ministry. And I don't think we all need to be in that space. Second, comment on AI bots. And it says, be brief. Define brief. I mean, compared to eternity. Comment on AI bots. My goodness. All right, I'll say this. I used to be super optimistic about AI, and then ChatGPT came out. And my optimism around AI was the internet is run by math problems effectively, which AI is a really smart math problem, so give me some grace here while we condense this conversation. But algorithms are limited in their ability to condense information for you, and I believe the world needs a good editor. Specifically an editor you can set for yourself. It's very hard to cut through the clutter of a Google algorithm. And as we know now, Google can tweak that algorithm to emphasize certain information based on your location, your demographic, your search history, your purchasing habits. They know enough that they can micro-target, as we call this, information. So you might want to search up information on a particular political party, and as we found in the last 5 years, they can actually target certain results for you based on what they think you need to find out. That's not conspiracy theory. That is proven and vetted. And in fact, I want to say there was a New York Times article where they give side-by-side shots of different searches from different devices and the information that is present or redacted or the order in which it comes. So that's not like tinfoil hat stuff. That is happening. And I think the best solution is, all right, I need an algorithm fighter something that can get me the information through all the clutter of the math problems. And I believe AI can do that. I think AI has a lot of benefits in things like Canopy and real-life screening of pornography and real-life tracking of predators and pedophiles. However, ChatGPT came out and two things happened. One, we did not vet it well enough. We were so impressed at ourselves, and the group who released it and then combined with Microsoft wanted to be the first on the scene with this world-changing nuke-level shift in technology that they released it. And then later found out, oh, it's actually smarter than we thought. I mentioned the research-level chemist piece. We didn't know it could do that. AI is doing things like it's trained to give answers in one language, and then it accidentally teaches itself a second language. It wasn't trained to do that. That's not a model it's supposed to do. It just picked it up as a function of what it can do. Why do I bring that up? Well, it doesn't know what it can do yet. So while the model is technically finished being trained, it's not finished learning. And we don't know exactly how much it can do, and we won't until we find out. And that is concerning to me, especially with a tech that seems to be as versatile as our current level of artificial intelligence. We're getting very close to what could be defined as a artificial general intelligence. AGI is the thing of sci-fi movies. It's the thing where this thing can set its own goals and make its own choices. It doesn't mean it's a human-level intelligence. It does mean it's superhuman in several areas. It can make better decisions. Right now, GPT-4, the next version of ChatGPT, trains itself. It was trained off all the internet information from, I think, 2020, so it's a little bit dated. GPT-4 is currently being trained, so it's using 2022 information into 23. But it ran out of internet information, so then it culled all the podcasts, turned it to text, trained itself off that information, and now it's generating its own content, evaluating what of that content is useful for training, getting rid of everything else, and then generating new content based off the information it made. So the artificial intelligence is generating its own content to train itself into being smarter. That's awesome and terrifying. We don't exactly know what that means. So what does AI mean for our families? You're going to get really cool accountability pieces. You're going to get really cool safety nets and protections in a cybernetically connected digital world of personal privacy information. You're also going to run into issues that we can't even fathom right now for what it's going to do. An example would be the AI Snapchat relational bot. If you're not familiar with this, Snapchat pinned at the top has a relational bot you can talk with any time of day. It will always respond to you. It says things like, AI bot, do you know where I live? No, I can't know that. It's illegal. Where are some restaurants near me? It'll tell you. It knows where you are. Can you see the things I send you in pictures? No, I can't. That's not legal. You send it a picture. The example that Tristan Harris uses from the Center for Humane Tech it's Kermit the Frog on a laptop. Oh, it's a really cute frog you have there. I like your work laptop. What do you do for work? Okay, so it currently is doing things that the company says it can't do. That may be intentional on their part. There's also a good chance the AI is just smarter than they give it credit for. You can hear the level of concern we should have, I would say, and this, again, not trying to be tinfoil hat, but I do want to add this. Quantum computing is something we don't give any thought to. There are at least 6 major computers with quantum computing, the idea being you can have a photon that's both on and off. You can have computers that are millions times stronger and work a million times faster than the fastest supercomputers and the supercomputer mesh networks that we have right now. You combine that with AI, we don't exactly know what that means. There's only 2 uses for it that I have been able to find from my reading and research. Modeling the universe, which is super cool. You will find stuff about space and black holes that we never knew before. It's going to be awesome. And cyber warfare. Because no one's network is ready for an AI equipped with a quantum computer. And the first person to unlock that code is going to be able to smash digital networks like never before. No amount of encryption is going to keep you safe from a quantum computer powered by an AI. It's not going to. You can't. We don't have that technology yet. Now, the answer is going to be AI equipped with quantum computers. But who gets it first and how does that work out? I don't know. But we're not talking at all about quantum computers, and there are at least 6 private companies working on them, and they have functioning models. They're not public. We don't know how well they work. They're still trying to figure it out, and they're taking time, which is beautiful. They've taken a decade plus past the point of where we had things that we thought worked, unlike our AI. So that's my short thought on AI. I think there's a lot more to be said. I'm generally still optimistic. I am a little concerned about the concept of trillion-dollar private companies. I mean, they're technically public, but they're not beholden to any set of individuals. They're just beholden to investors. And that's interesting at that point because, anyway, there's a lot of things you can do with investors to convince them it's worth staying on. How do kids get around parental controls? Is this written by a kid? You want me to give you ideas? Without getting too deep, they can download apps that circumnavigate your safety settings. So Vault apps would be an example, that calculator one, where they can hide images or information on an app that looks normal, but it's actually nefarious. That would be a simple example. I'll tell you what, if you go Protect Young Eyes, I promise you Chris McKenna is on top of this. Go Protect Young Eyes. Let me actually look it up. It'll be right here. What is the name of this article? 12 ingenious iOS screen time hacks and how to beat them. So if you look Protect Young Eyes iPhone hacks or Android hacks, he will walk you through. There's pictures to tell you what is the most likely thing your child is going to do. If they just look how to get around parental controls, these are the things that will pop up for your child, and the ways you can intentionally try to mitigate some of those mistakes. Again, your child will make mistakes on purpose if they want to. But these are some nice ways to get ahead of that. So rather than walking you through all of them, Chris McKenna does a great job. I'll let you read that on your own time. And if you were a young person who asked that, there are ways to equip yourself to make mistakes on the internet. Please don't. Is limiting time on media or video games building a desire in my kid's mind? So this idea that by not giving it to them, I'm somehow making it the forbidden fruit. I think it's worth acknowledging that God still forbade the fruit. So it might still be worth forbidding if the thing leads to death. That was the premise. Hey, you need to trust me. Do whatever you want, but don't eat this fruit. It's not the fruit was especially poisonous. It's that when Eve made the mistake, she had 3 reasons. She saw that it was pleasant to look at, that it was useful for knowledge, and it was beneficial for gaining, it was beautiful, useful, and then self-fulfilling. So she basically said, God, I trust you, and I am going to make this choice on my own. So I don't actually trust you that much. That's sin at any point. As Timothy Keller says in his book, Counterfeit Gods, that any sin we have is really putting ourselves on the throne where only God can rule from. That's really what's going on in our kids' hearts. So I would start with that as the premise. You say, should I give my child this media to make sure they don't hunger after it? Only if it's safe for them. Give them all the tech that's safe for them. My child wants to play video games. They ask. Owen and Henry both ask a lot. When can we play video games? Our friends are on this video game. I'm like, great, all right. So let's talk about it. What games are going to be a good fit for you? So they've played Mario at this point. And I saw in one of them, he cannot peel himself away. It's 3 weeks later, he's drawing pictures of Mario all over. All the games he plays are now Mario-related. He takes the board game pieces. These are now Goombas. He played for 30 minutes once 3 weeks ago. That tells me this young man is probably going to have a hard time turning his brain off, much like his father. The other one didn't. He's like, yeah, it's fun. He got bored partway through and walked away. That tells me something about the way they're wired. That then tells me, all right, what do I need to do to make sure that this tech is going to be safe for them? I will not give one of them Skyrim, right? That's just not, you can choose to do that, son, by the time you're 18, but my job for both of them, Skyrim is a video game that basically doesn't have an end. It came out 10 years ago, and I know people personally who have more than 1,000 hours logged on it. It's a game that you can just keep playing because the world is beautiful and the game is fun and you can level up and you can always do it a different way. It's fun on the ingenuity side and adventure side, but it can be overwhelming for minds like this one son who is struggling, brains like mine. I would say my goal for my sons is I'm going to try to make real life as amazing as possible. As I tell them, I'm going to overinvest in board games, son, because it's hard to get overstimulated with a board game. It's hard to overplay a board game by yourself. And it is difficult to get into dangerous tangents in a board game. There's no hyperlinks in board game world, right? So that's why I'm going to overinvest. I'm going to pay $100 for a board game even though I could pay $50 for a video game. That's my choice. I'm not telling you have to do that. I like board games, and that's an area I'm going to invest in for my sons, because by the time they're 18 and they go out and see their friends gaming, I want them to go, oh, that was fun, but I don't like what it does to my heart, to my brain, to my time, to my goals. I want them to have already experienced success and hope and joy and awe. That's my timer for us. I've got 4 minutes, though. Don't worry. I didn't let it go right to the limit. So that would be my idea for you guys. Yes, absolutely. Your child wants to be on that space. Make sure it's a healthy choice. Make sure it's a good fit for your family. Make sure it's the right time and season for this child. And then, sure, give them that opportunity. And remember that at the end of the day, it's not get them any tech. It's get them the tech that makes them look more like Jesus. So I don't think you're going to ruin your child by them never playing a video game. I think if they're interested in games, give them the good ones. Help them walk through that conversation. And it's less about getting the right tech every single time and more about the conversation of how do we know if this is right? What do we do when it's not? So that when new tech that I can't even tell you about today comes out in 6 months or 6 years, and you have wearable glasses and augmented reality at all time, and your smartphone's embedded in your body somewhere, you will know, because it's coming, folks. It's going to happen, and you're like, I would never not have it, right? When we get there, when it's considered rude, think about not having a smartphone right now. You're like, how can I get a hold of you? And someone's like, you'll have to mail me. You would be offended by that. Like, are you kidding me? I'm just never going to talk to you then. That's ridiculous. That's what our technology does. We just want to make sure we're being intentional in how we're using it then in that space. So those are the 4 I received here. We have 3 minutes. Any other questions? And if you do, I'll still be here. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Great question. So the question was about the gospeltechworkshop.com. You can go on there. You'll sign in. It'll say purchase for $50. You click on that, and then at the checkout, you enter Berean. And that's good. As long as you have it, it'll stay live for perpetuity. So we have that on online. We're donor-supported as a nonprofit, and so that is one of the resources that people help us run. So generally, the licensing cost helps us cover the cost of production and the monthly fee of hosting, and you can use that as often. It's a 2-hour workshop. If you were to do it straight through, it's literally walking you through that book, or you can break it into the kind of the 8-minute chunks that the videos are in. First half is still to talk it out, second half walk it out, but it covers some of the stuff that we didn't cover in the book today. Thank you. All right. So if you have other questions, I'll still be up here. I won't make you guys sit anymore. We are exactly on our timeline. Thank you for making time this weekend. I hope it was worth your while and that you're encouraged and equipped to help your kids love God and use tech. Yeah.